Okay, well, joining us now here in Doha is Ranj Alaaldin, a visiting fellow at Brookings, Doha. He was listening there to the former Iraqi government spokesman. He was saying that this battle is likely to take days, not weeks. What do you think of that?
I think that's far too optimistic. There's three components to this operation. The first is you have to clear Mosul of ISIS fighters, of the ISIS presence. The second is you've got to hold on to the territory. And the third is you've got to rebuild Mosul. Now, if ISIS assimilates into the local population, it's not going to be easy to distinguish between ISIS fighters and the civilian population. Just because ISIS doesn't put up much of a fight this time around, that doesn't mean it isn't saving itself, its resources to fight another day. It could opt for the more prolonged battle in its usual insurgency mode, as it's done so effectively over the past 10 years. Then, of course, there's the whole aspect of bringing in the local population back into their homes, the IDPs, the refugees. You're going to need resources to invest in places like Mosul to make sure people have jobs, to make sure ISIS doesn't reorganize itself, resurrect itself in the coming period. So it's far too optimistic at this stage to be assuming that it's going to be days and not months, possibly even years before the place is fully functional again.
To what extent can ISIL assimilate itself into the local population? To what extent has the local population of Mosul embraced it?
So ISIS is heavily entrenched. It has significant overlap with the local population. Whether we like it or not, to some degree or another, it has had some support amongst the local population. But that doesn't mean necessarily it has the wholehearted support of the local population. They've had to contend with, on the one hand, what they perceive to be a sectarian Baghdad Shia-dominated government, whilst on the other hand, an organization that's come in to offer them some hope, some prospects. They've had to contend with ISIS brutality, so it's a difficult issue itself. It's not black and white, but I don't think they have the kind of support that can sustain them in the longer run without their brutality, of course.
Because Mosul was such a mess, wasn't it, when ISIL came in? It was almost ripe for the taking because public servants weren't being paid, basic social services weren't in place. I mean, there really wasn't much in the way of governance going on.
That's right. So if you want to win the hearts and minds of the local population, if you want to ensure organizations like ISIS, whether it's in its previous incarnations or whatever form it takes in the coming period in the future, you have to give people jobs. You have to give them reassurances that their livelihoods aren't going to be affected. You have to remedy sectarian divisions. And at the moment, the government in Baghdad just lacks that capacity to do so, particularly because there are no guarantees the Iraqi security forces, which are very fragmented. You've got all these disparate groups taking part in this operation. Nobody quite knows who it is that's going to be doing the rebuilding of Mosul.
They say that the Shia militia are going to be staying on the perimeters of the city, that they're not going to be entering into and mingling with the local population. I mean, is that realistic?
I think one thing we have to remember is that the Shia militias have their own agendas. They have their own backers in the region, whether that's in Iran or elsewhere. They are sitting on the sidelines for now, but if they perceive their interests to be threatened in terms of the broader strategic significance of this operation, they could step in. We've seen them step in previous operations, in previous places when it served their interests. They're a very sizable force. They have a lot of resources. They're heavily armed. They have made a number of threats over the past few weeks, particularly in regards to the Turkish presence in Mosul, so they could step in if they wanted to. So we'll have to wait and see. And
just a brief note on the Peshmerga, because of course they're taking a key role. We even heard from Baghdad there that they are needed greatly in this battle. But what's going to be their role post-battle?
So the Kurds and the Peshmerga, they have a number of outstanding disputes with the Baghdad government. They've been outstanding for the past 10 years in relation to territory, resources. They'll try and leverage whatever territorial gains they make in this operation in relation to those disputes with Baghdad. They are expected to play a significant humanitarian role in this. They're expected to screen potential refugees coming in from Mosul, going into the Kurdistan region. They won't be taking part in the inner city urban battle itself. But again, going back to these conflicting agendas, it could all become very chaotic very quickly.
It sounds like it already is. Ranj Alaaldin, thanks very much for joining us here on set with your expertise on the area.
Pleasure.
Do stay with us. Still ahead here on Al Jazeera. We'll be bringing you more on the situation in Mosul and the day's other global news.